Imagine the sound, a heavy steel door slamming shut, echoing through the halls, marking the end of freedom. For Juan Rivera, this wasn't just a moment of terror. It was a nightmare that repeated 3 times, each for a crime he didn't commit. Convicted for a murder another man had already confessed to, Juan's story exposes the cracks in our justice system. He was just 20. His life derailed by a system determined to see him as guilty. The evidence? A confession. One obtained after days of relentless interrogation. But what if that confession was a lie, forced from a vulnerable young man? Juan Rivera's ordeal forces us to question the very foundation of justice. Can an innocent person be convicted, not once, but 3 times? This is more than one man's story. It's a call to examine how justice is served in our name. In August 1992, the quiet city of Waukegan, Illinois, was shattered by a crime that would haunt its residents for decades. 11-year-old Holly Staker, a bright and energetic girl, was found murdered in a local apartment. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, leaving parents fearful and children suddenly aware of dangers they'd never imagined. Holly was discovered brutally assaulted and murdered in her babysitter's apartment, a place that should have been safe. The horror of the crime scene left even seasoned detectives shaken, and the news quickly spread, igniting panic and sorrow throughout Waukegan. Fear and grief swept through the city, uniting neighbors in shock and mourning. The pressure on police to find the killer was immediate and intense, as the public demanded answers and justice for Holly. The Lake County Major Crime Task Force launched a massive investigation, canvassing neighborhoods and interviewing dozens of witnesses. But as days passed without a suspect, the need for answers quickly turned into a desperate rush to find someone to blame. Juan Rivera, a 20-year-old with a minor record and a history of mental health struggles, soon became the focus of the investigation, despite no physical evidence linking him to the crime. His background and vulnerability made him an easy target for suspicion. The community, desperate for closure and eager to believe the nightmare was over, accepted the narrative that the monster had been caught. Headlines declared a breakthrough, and hope flickered that justice would be served. Rallies were held in Holly's memory, and her name became a symbol of lost innocence. The town came together in grief, determined to honor her life and demand accountability. When Rivera was arrested, many felt a wave of relief, convinced that justice was finally within reach. The sense of safety began to return, if only briefly. But as the case moved forward, the desire for a conviction soon overshadowed the need for real proof. Questions about the investigation and Rivera's guilt were pushed aside in the rush to close the case. The stage was set for a legal battle that would challenge the very foundations of justice in Waukegan and leave a legacy of doubt for years to come. Juan Rivera's first trial in 1993 hinged on a single piece of evidence, his signed confession. The prosecution presented it as the ultimate proof of guilt, despite the troubling circumstances under which it was obtained. Rivera, a young man with no prior criminal record, had spent days in a small interrogation room, isolated and exhausted, before finally signing the statement that would change his life forever. There was no DNA, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, just words on paper after days of police interrogation. The physical evidence that could have tied Rivera to the crime simply didn't exist. Instead, the prosecution relied on the confession, ignoring the glaring absence of any forensic link to the scene. Despite the lack of physical evidence, the jury convicted him. The confession was too powerful to ignore. Jurors later admitted they felt pressured by the gravity of the crime and the apparent certainty of Rivera's own words, even as doubts lingered in their minds. An appellate court overturned the conviction, citing serious concerns about the reliability of the confession and the fairness of the trial. But the prosecution was undeterred. They tried him again in 1998, using the same confession as their central piece of evidence, determined to secure another conviction. Once more, the jury convicted him, and Rivera returned to prison. Each time, the weight of the confession overshadowed the lack of any real proof. Rivera's hopes for justice faded as he faced the reality of a system unwilling to admit its mistakes. Years later, that conviction was overturned, leading to a third trial in 2009. By now, Rivera had spent more than a decade behind bars, his life on hold as the legal battle dragged on. This time, prosecutors claimed to have DNA evidence linking Rivera to the crime. The promise of new science brought hope for clarity, but the evidence was far from conclusive. Questions swirled about the accuracy of the testing and the chain of custody. The defense challenged the validity of this new evidence, arguing that it was unreliable and did not actually implicate Rivera. Still, the jury convicted him yet again, swayed by the prosecution's narrative and the lingering power of the confession. 3 trials, 3 convictions, all based on a confession obtained under duress. And still, the truth remained hidden. Rivera's ordeal became a symbol of how the justice system can fail, especially when it clings to a single, questionable piece of evidence. The system seemed determined to uphold a narrative, no matter the cost. Each conviction deepened the injustice, as officials refused to reconsider the possibility of error. Rivera's fate was sealed by a confession, not by facts. The evidence that could have exonerated him was ignored, while the confession, wrung from him after hours of pressure, became the only thing that mattered. The real story was buried beneath layers of legal error and prosecutorial stubbornness. Each appeal, each new trial, only seemed to reinforce the original mistake, rather than correct it. Justice, for Juan Rivera, was nowhere in sight. His case stands as a stark reminder of how easily the truth can be lost when the system values convictions over real justice. The heart of the case was Rivera's confession, but how was it obtained? Rivera, with cognitive limitations, was interrogated for nearly 4 days by seasoned detectives. He was lied to, told his fingerprints were at the scene, and that he failed a polygraph. None of it true. Isolated, sleep-deprived, and emotionally exhausted, Rivera's resistance crumbled. Experts say that under such pressure, even the innocent can break and confess just to end the torment. The details in his confession matched facts only the police knew, because they fed him those details. Rivera signed a statement he didn't write, just to make it stop. At trial, his lawyers argued the confession was coerced, but juries couldn't look past the signed paper. The idea that an innocent person would confess seemed unthinkable, but Rivera's words were not his own. They were the product of relentless psychological pressure. While Rivera fought for his life, another man, serial killer Brian Dugan, confessed to Holly Staker's murder. Dugan, already serving life for other murders, gave a detailed confession with facts only the real killer could know. He described the crime scene, the weapon, and the method of entry, details never made public. Yet prosecutors dismissed Dugan's confession, clinging to Rivera's coerced statement. They claimed Dugan was lying or seeking attention, ignoring the overwhelming evidence. Even after Dugan confessed again, providing more details, authorities refused to reconsider Rivera's conviction. The truth was inconvenient, so it was ignored. An innocent man remained in prison while the real killer's words were buried. Rivera's legal team fought for years to test the DNA evidence collected from Holly Staker's body. When finally tested, the results were clear. The DNA did not match Juan Rivera. Science proved what Rivera had always said. He was innocent. The next step was obvious. Compare the DNA to Brian Dugan. The result? A perfect match. Dugan's DNA was at the crime scene. The combination of Dugan's confession and the DNA evidence was irrefutable. Even then, prosecutors hesitated to admit their mistake. But the case against Rivera collapsed under the weight of scientific truth. In 2011, an appellate court threw out Rivera's conviction for good. After 2 decades, the truth finally set him free. DNA had succeeded where the justice system had failed. On January 6, 2012, Juan Rivera walked out of prison after 20 years of wrongful incarceration. He was greeted by family and his legal team, but the world he returned to was unrecognizable. Rivera faced the daunting task of rebuilding his life, carrying deep psychological scars. He filed a civil rights lawsuit, alleging that police had fabricated evidence and coerced his confession. In 2018, a federal jury awarded him $20 million, acknowledging the injustice he suffered. The money could never restore his lost years, but it was a public declaration of his innocence. Rivera's case became a national symbol of the dangers of false confessions. He emerged from the darkness determined to fight for change. Juan Rivera's ordeal highlights a systemic problem: false confessions. Nearly 30% of DNA exonerations involve false confessions, especially among the young and vulnerable. Long interrogations, deception, and isolation can break even the innocent. Rivera's low IQ made him especially susceptible to police pressure. After his release, Rivera became an advocate for reform. sharing his story to educate the public and lawmakers. He joined other exonerees, pushing for changes like mandatory recording of interrogations and limits on deceptive tactics. Some states have responded, but nationwide reform is still needed. Rivera's voice and those of others like him are crucial in this fight. Their stories are proof that the system can, and does, make devastating mistakes. The work to prevent future injustices is far from over. Imagine yourself in a windowless interrogation room, exhausted and alone, the air heavy with tension. The hours drag on, and you haven't seen the outside world in what feels like forever. You're surrounded by unfamiliar faces, and every question feels like a trap. Your mind races, searching for a way out, but the pressure only builds. Now picture being pressured to confess to a crime you didn't commit. The detectives insist they have evidence, even if you know you're innocent. They repeat the same questions, their voices growing sharper, their patience wearing thin. You start to doubt yourself, wondering if anyone will ever believe your side of the story. Could you resist, hour after hour, day after day, as fatigue and fear set in? Most of us like to think we could, but the truth is, under relentless pressure, even the strongest can break. False confessions are more common than we realize. Juan Rivera's story forces us to question our faith in confessions and the justice system. He was convicted based on a confession obtained after hours of intense questioning, despite evidence of his innocence. We must ask, how was the confession obtained? Was the suspect vulnerable, young, or exhausted? Was the process recorded, and were proper safeguards in place to protect the innocent? Rivera's ordeal is a lesson in the fallibility of justice and the need for vigilance. Share his story with others, and talk about the dangers of relying solely on confessions. Discuss the importance of recording interrogations from start to finish, and support organizations that fight for the wrongfully convicted. These groups work tirelessly to uncover the truth and prevent future injustices. Support reforms that protect the innocent, like mandatory recording of all interrogations, and clear rules that prevent coercion and manipulation. Advocate for limits on deceptive tactics, and demand transparency in every step of the process. Learn about your local prosecutors and judges. Demand accountability and fairness from those who hold power over people's lives. The fight for justice for one is a fight for all. When we stand together, we can make a difference and protect the innocent from wrongful convictions. Only by demanding change and staying vigilant can we ensure that a slamming prison door never again marks the start of an innocent person's nightmare. Justice depends on all of us.